All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin a beautiful daf ahead of us today. Begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning's shir. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Elul, Shani and Avram Kalman for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this month in honor of Yechiel's engagement to Alana Falik and the memory of their parents, Jerome and Bernice Kalman, Alexander and Frederica David, Zichronim Libracha. Barak, Maya, Sandy Hoffman, Dara Limas, and Avi Malamed for dedicating all the shiurim this month in memory of Reuven ben Emmanuel. Ayal and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating all the shiurim this month in the schus of Refuah Shalima for Shulamis Bas Susha. The Daf Yomi shir for dedicating the shiurim this month in the schus of Refuah Shalima for Yehuda ben Michal. First, we thank our Day of Learning sponsor, Steve Galaskov, for dedicating the learning today in memory of his father, Nochum Sender ben Meshulam Nasan, whose Hakamas Matseva unveiling is today. We hope that under the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah, the family a nechama, all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Choli Yisrael. And Rabbi say, of course, it goes without saying that today, September 11th, is the anniversary of the worst terror attack to ever occur on American soil, claiming the lives of a few thousand innocent individuals. We, of course, dedicate our learning today in their memory. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, their neshamas will have an aliyah, their families will have a nechama, and halavai, we hope, we daven every single day for the day Mashiach will come, such evil will be eradicated from the face of the earth, and mankind will be blanketed in Meretz Hashem by an everlasting sense of shalom. I will say with that, let us begin. Today's Daf is Samech Zayin 67, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Daf Samech Zayin. Thanks to Reb Kalman Akiva, we're picking up on Samech Zayin. So we're going to start at the two dots in Meretz Hashem. We have a really beautiful Gemara ahead of us today, some incredible sugyas. So let's begin. Amr of Shman Bar Abba. So I will say on 67a, about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 lines down from the top. So let's remember again, one of the topics we had in the Mishnah is that when a woman brings in items as her dowry, as her nedunya, those items were valued. Now, and those values were recorded inside of the ksuva, so that in the event of death or divorce, not only is what we'll call ikar ksuva paid out, but whatever nedunya that she brought in is also technically paid out as well. But what we've seen from the Mishnah is that halacha l'maisa, some items are recorded at value, some item has their value increased, some of the items have their value decreased. Again, so we continue with that theme. So what happens if a woman brings gold into the marriage? So what's the halacha? Shamin oso v'hariu kishav yav. We value it, or evaluate it, we appraise it. And again, it's recorded in the ksuva at its value. Look at Rashi, last white line in Rashi. V'hariu kishav yav, lo yosif shlish, v'lo yifchos chomesh. So gold apparently is neither appreciated nor depreciated. May say, is that true? Hazav hariu kekelim. Yet we learn in the Brisa that gold is like utensils. My lav kekelim shal kasef. Depachsi, is it not ultimately again like kalim, like utensils of silver? Depachsi, ultimately again, which are depreciated. So the Gemara says, "Lo kikalim shal zav de lo pachsi." No, it's like golden utensils, ultimately again, that are not diminished in value. Imkain kikei love mi ba'ilei. If that's the case, then the Brisa should have said hazav harihu kikei love. Gold. Now, both say, by the way, I'll point out over here, Rashi points out that the zav we're talking about is zahav shavur, broken gold pieces. We're actually going to make a distinction between solid gold pieces, gold dust, and gold chips. Halavai, we should all be zocha to have to know these distinctions. So the Gemara goes, furthermore we learn, zav, hareyu kekalim. So ultimately, zav, gold, is like utensils. Dinari zav, harein keksafim. But again, dinarim of gold, ultimately again, are like silver. So the Gemara says, Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Omer b'makom shenagu sholavartan, shamin osan, v'harihin b'shivyan. So Reb Shimon Gamliel says, quoting another brayso, Reb Shimon Gamliel says that at the end of this brayso, that in a place where gold coins ultimately, again, are not normally exchanged. If you look at Rashi Lefartan, it's in the short lines of Rashi, about 6 lines in Lefartan. Sheish lan kitzvas matbeya lachlifan tamid b'dinari kesef ubeprutos We'll say, generally, if you had gold coins, as nice as that sounds, it's kind of like walking into a convenience store, with $100 bill, right? Often you're going to have a problem. So gold coins, as nice as they sound, they're not really liquid. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says over here, in a place where they did not normally exchange. So lefartan means an ability to go ahead and readily exchange gold coins into smaller denominations. Shamin osan, you appraise them. V'harehem b'shivyan, and ultimately, again, they remain with that appraisal. In other words, not appreciated, not depreciated. So Rabbi said, which part of the brisa is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel referring to? If he's referring to the latter part of the brisa, sounds like the Tanakama holds that Allah Lamaisa, gold coins are appraised at their value, even in a place where they are not normally readily exchangeable. Halo nafki, but here's the problem: then they can't be used as real liquid cash. Elalava reisha, right? He must be referring to the reisha. V'achikamar, this is what Shimon wants to say. V'achikamar, zav hariu kikelim. Gold in general is treated like utensils. My kalim, what kalim we're referring to? Kalim shal kasef. Ultimately, again, they are treated like kalim shal kasef. Ultimately, again, they are treated like silver utensils. Okay, the Gemara says, says, well, harhein kedinarin shal zav b'makom shenagu shelo lefartan. Ultimately, again, Rabbi Shimon says, no, gold itself can be treated like dinarim of gold in a place where they are not readily exchangeable. To which the Gemara says, lo, li'olam ha-seifa, maybe not. Rabbi Shimon is ultimately going on the seifa, v'dinafki al yidei hadchak. And perhaps what we're talking about over here is when a person has gold dinarim that could be used. In other words, they are usable, but they're usable with a degree of difficulty. In other words, they're not as readily usable as other forms of currency, but ultimately, again, they're usable with some difficulty. And I will say here is what they are arguing about. Mar savar kevan denafki mishabchinale. So one opinion says that ultimately, since they are usable, albeit with a bit of difficulty, mishabchinale. Therefore, we appreciate the value of them when they include them in the brisa. Umar savar kevan de lo nafki al yedei adchak lo mishabchinale. Others say since they're not readily usable, but they're only usable ayadei adchak. Therefore, when we record it in the Kesuva, we do not appreciate the value. Another possibility is maybe the entire brayso reflects Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. And perhaps there's something missing. And here is how it is supposed to be recorded. Here we go. Zav hariu kikelim. Gold is treated like utensils. Dinari zav harehen kiksafim. Ultimately, again, so dinari zav are treated like cash. And therefore, their valuations in the ksuva reflect these realities. When is this so? B'makom shenagu lefartan. Ultimately, again, in a place where gold coins were readily usable. But in a place where gold coins are not readily usable, shamin osan, we appraise them, v'harihem b'shavyan, and therefore they're recorded in the ksuva at their value. Why? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer b'makom shinago shelo lefartan shamin osan v'harihem b'shivyan. Because Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that any place where gold or gold coins in this case are not readily exchangeable and usable, they are appraised at their value, and we record that value in the ksuva. So it says in Gemara, Mikal Makom kikelav mi baile. But still we go back to our original question. Then it should have said that gold is like its utensils. Kasha. Enachinami, the Gemara says that's a kasha. Another possibility is Hachamayaskinan. What's the case? Bidava pricha. When we talk about gold, what are we talking about? Gold chips, as I mentioned before. Gold chips. Rav Ashi Amar ben Mamlo. Rav Ashi says, no, we're not talking about gold chips. Rather, what? We're talking about gold dust. Gold dust. So both say, bottom line. What do we do with gold? It's a machlokes. And I both say, what I just want to point out, so what's the conclusion of the sugya? So remember again, I quoted to you when we started this, we mentioned this already last week. So the Rambam's position is with these kind of things, hakol holech achar minhag hamadina. Right? When it comes to these type of valuations, here's essentially what we know. What we know is that halacha l'maisa, there's two parts of it. There's three parts of the ksuva. What are the three parts of the ksuva? Well, there's more than three, but so financially there's three. There's ikr ksuva, which is either 200 or 100, depending on first marriage, second marriage. There's tosefes. How much is tosefes? How much is tosefes? Whatever the husband chooses. And then number three, there's nedunya. And what's nedunya? Nedunya is what the wife is bringing into the marriage that ultimately, again, we record values in the ksuva. So in the event of dissolution of the marriage, the wife gets back her nedunya. What we've now seen when it comes to nedunya is what? There are certain items that appreciate. There are certain items that depreciate. There are certain items that will remain extant and certain items that we know ultimately, again, will be used up over the course of the marriage. So how to go ahead and record these values in the ksuva, the Rambam just simply says, you can't codify it. You can't really codify it because l'maisa, again, everything depends, we're going to see some more examples, everything depends on where you are. But here's what we know, right? Our takeaway from this is everything she brings in into the marriage is ultimately categorized and is recorded. Some appreciated, some depreciated, some at its actual value. Some other examples of this, very interesting examples. Amar Rabbi Bisamim shel Antuchya. Let's say she brings in spices from Antuchya. Look at Rashi. Bisamim shel Antuchya hu ikr schorasan v'isha shechnisa lebayla shum mehem harikiksa from the hosif shlish. So I'll say, let's say she brings in these spices from Antuchya, which in Antuchya was like a primary item, a primary staple of commerce. Harehen kiksafim. It's treated ultimately again like money. Namely, Rashi points out over here that it is recorded in the ksuva at an appreciated value. Amr B'Shlomo Nachmani, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Gemalim shel Aravya, Arabian camels. Let's say she brings into the marriage Arabian camels. So ultimately, again, Isha Gova Parna. Ultimately, again, a woman will collect, Parna Rabosai means a profit. What does that mean, Rashi? Revach Shlish. So we'll say Rashi records this as these items are recorded in the ksuva at an additional third, a third appreciation. The Bach and others, Tosas Rid, has it at an additional half. Okay, the point over here is these items are recorded not at their actual value, but rather at an appreciated value. Amra Papi, Hani Tusvi Debe Machsi. These, what are Tusvi Debe Machsi? Rashi says over here, Smalos Shal Oso Makom. These clothing, shirts of Bemachsi. Again, these were specific kind of garments. If a woman brings them into the marriage, Isha Gova Parna Mehem. They are recorded in the ksuva with an appreciated value. Mamra Papi, Hani Saki Dirudya, Va'ashli de Kamchunya. Similarly, again, if she brings in these sacks from Rudya or these ropes from Kamchunya, Isha Gova Parnamim. Once again, they are recorded in the ksuva at an appreciated value. Va'amar Rava said, so now, Meresh, Hava Amina, Hani Arniki de Mechuza, Isha Gova Parnamim. They both say, here we're switching gears a little bit. This discussion, Rabbi say, changes to now a husband died and a woman wants to collect her ksuva from the estate. So now what happens? So Rabbi said, I thought in the beginning, Hani Arniki de Mechuza. It will say the money bags of Mechuza. So apparently in Mechuza it was common for people to keep bags of money. So Rabbi said, I thought in the beginning that when a woman wants to collect her ksuva from the estate, Isha Gova Parna Mehem. Ultimately, she collects her ksuva from what? From the bags of money in Mechuzah. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, Parna, lazeh shamati ksuva min nichse yisomim, v'lo min metatli diyasim shtam. So Rav is saying, in Mechuzah, where they often kept bags of money, I thought that when a woman collected her ksuva, she was going to collect her ksuva from those bags of money. My time, what's the reason? Asamchetaihu alayhu. Because what's very interesting, because a woman has das, that's where ksuva is going to come from. Because since there are literally bags of money lying around in mechuzah, right? Literally bags of money. So that is an easy way to collect the value of the ksuva. So she has smichos das. We'll say smichos das means her das is collected from there, and bepashtos, her husband's das is to pay it from there. So Rabbi said originally, I thought that's where a woman will collect her ksuva from. Kevan de chazoi, the shakli lahu, V'nafki v'chimashkechi ara zabini behu. But then when I saw that people do an interesting thing, what do people do? They go out and they take the money and what? And what? Purchase land. So they take the money and purchase land with it. Amina asamchitayu a'arahu. I realized that people's das ultimately again was on land. See, I will say, here's what's interesting. At the end of the day, what Rabbi was saying is like this. Originally, I thought that halacha l'maisa, a woman would go ahead and have smichas das to collect the money. But then when I saw, what does a woman do with the bag of money that she takes in mechuz? What does she do with it? She buys land. Because at the end of the day, a woman wants to make, the ksuva payment is what she has. Right? That's what she has. So it doesn't make sense that she's going to schlep around or hold on to a bag of money. She's going to take the bag of money, she's going to invest it into real estate. So Rava said, once I saw that they were buying real estate anyway, I realized that really her ksuva should be collected from real property and not from movable property, even from a bag of money. Okay, beautiful. We'll say, take a look at Rashi. Asmichatinu alahu. Rashi's actually, fine. So we'll say, so that's there, good. So therefore, I just want to point out that last case was just a shift. Because up until now, we've been focusing on ultimately is what? Is halacha l'maisa, the recording of nedunya. The Gemara switched gears now to her collecting from the estate. Not her nedunya, but instead what? Her ksuva. Beautiful. So here we go. Mishnah. Hamas yes bito stam lo yifchas lamichamishim zuz. If a person is marrying off his daughter, so what is the minimum amount of dowry that one should give to their daughter? Minimum amount, 50 zuz. 50 zuz. Pasek lachnis arum. So we'll say, this is an interesting expression. Let's say the father stipulated, right, he said to the chassan, I'm marrying off my daughter unclothed, which was an expression that meant, I'm not giving my daughter anything. So let's say a father stipulated, he sat down with the chassan, right, heart to heart, I'm not giving my daughter anything. What's the halacha? Lo yomer habal kisha achni sena lebesi akasno biksusi ela mechase va'oda beis avia. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. Under normal circumstances, a chassan is not obligated to clothe his wife until when? Till she enters his home. But in this case, where he realizes that the father is not giving her anything, he's not allowed to say, when she comes to live in my home, I'll begin to clothe her. Rather, right after Erisin, he has the obligation to clothe her. What's the novelty here? Even though halacha l'maisa, she is still living in her father's home. So the Gemara said, "V'chein hamas yes hayisoma." So too again, if one marries off a yisoma, so we'll say, so that's halacha. So really, two halachas over here. Halacha number one, minimum amount of dowry, 50 zuz. Halacha number two, if father says, I'm not giving my daughter any dowry, he says this to the chassan. Chassan assumes responsibility to clothe his wife immediately after Erisin, even though they are not living together. Next, last halacha, v'chinamas yes hayisoma. I will say so too. Let's say a girl. So this is a yisoma. She has no parents. So who's paying for her chasana? Staka funds, the community charity fund. Right. So we'll say if let's say the community is marrying off a yisoma, lo yifchas la mechamishim zuz. The community should not give her a dowry of less than 50 zuz. Im yesh bekis mefarnes in os lefi kvoda. And if the tzedakah fund has more money, then ultimately, again, we should give her a dowry that's even more reflective of her station. So the idea, we'll say, is in a third halacha, which we're going to spend some significant time on today, is that halacha l'maisa, if the community is marrying her off, once again, minimum dowry of 50 zuz, unless, of course, there's more money in the tzedakah fund. In that case, we should give her even a larger dowry, reflecting the cover of her family. Excuse me. Oh, Rabbi, here we go. Rabbi says, Chabishim zuz pshiti. Rabbi says, by the way, the 50 zuz minimum dowry is what we call simple zuz. So we had this in last week's daf as well. There's what we call zuze pshiti and zuze turi. So in other words, Tyrian zuz or regular zuz. Tyrian zuz were a much higher value currency. Zuzi pshiti were a lower value. So the Gemara just want to point out that when we speak about 50 zuzim, we're talking about the more minimal currency. Zuzi pshiti. Mima, how do we know this? So we'll say, because we said in the end of the Mishnah, that if in the pocket, what's the pocket? The pocket is the communal tzedakah fund. If the communal tzedakah fund has more money, we ultimately give her more than 50 zuz. Varminon. My kiss, what's the kiss? Amrach ba'arniki shel tzedakah. Literally again, it's the wallet of tzedakah. V'slakadaitin chamishim zuzim mamish. And if you think that chamishim zuzin means the higher level zuzin, the Tyrian zuzin, ultimately again, the Gemara says, so I'm sorry, v'slakadaitin chamishim zuzim mamish, im yesh bekis, kama yavin Allah. So we'll say, just to point out, a dowry of 50 zuzi turi, of 50 Tyrian zuzin, would have been an enormous amount of money. So we'll say, so again, any woman who would get such a dowry like that would be in wonderful shape. So then, would the tzedakah fund be obligated to give her more than that? It doesn't make sense. Therefore, it must be that when the Mishnah discusses the lashon or discusses the 50 zuzim, what type of zuzim are we talking about? What we call zuzi pshiti, the lower level zuzin. Incredible. So the Gemara says, good. But say some really fascinating halachas. Yasam v'yisoma shabalis parnes. But say, so let's say again, there is a boy orphan and a girl orphan who come to the tzedakah fund because they need help. And I will say, let's say again, there's only enough money to help one of them. We first support the girl and then support the boy. Why? Because I will say it is the derech of a man to go ahead and literally go door to door. If he has to collect, he'll collect. Ve'ein ha'isha darka lachzor. But it's not the derech. It's not the derech of a woman to have to go ahead. When we say it's not the derech of the woman, what we're really saying over here is it's much more humiliating for a woman to have to ask than it is for a man. So therefore, again, if there's only a limited amount of money in the tzedakah fund, we'll go ahead and we'll give to the girl. We'll give to the, well, in this case, it's a girl. It's a yisoma. We'll give to the girl and not to the boy. Amud Beis. So I'm sorry, actually not yet. So Yasam v'Yisoma, next case. Yasam v'Yisoma, Shebo, now I'm Beis. Shebo linase. Shebo say, so remember, case number one was a case of tzedakah, right? I have a Yasam and a Yisoma that show up, both needing funds. There's only enough money for one of them. What does the Mishnah say? What does the Gemara say? Give to the Yasam, give to the Yisoma, not to the Yasam, give to the girl, not to the boy. Because again, it's easier for a man to have to ask than it is for a woman. Good. Next case, Yasam v'Yisoma she'boin linaseh. So you have Yasam and Yisoma who came to get married. In other words, they need community help in order to get married. Masines ha'Yisoma v'achar kach masines ha'Yasam. We go ahead and we marry off the Yisoma and then the Yasam. So in other words, we provide for her wedding before I provide for his wedding. What's the logic? Mipnei sheboshta shal isha meruba mishal ish. Shabbos says it's very interesting. At the end of the day, why? Because the embarrassment of a woman of being unmarried is greater than the embarrassment of a man. So the idea over here is that there's a more acute need for the Yisoma to get married than there is ultimately, again, for the Yasser. I will say, by the way, it's also been in financial security. So I've done this many times before, that especially, again, Bismana Gimara, a woman had financial security either by living with her father or by living with her husband. Obviously, if she's Yisoma, she doesn't have a father. So again, it's not just the boshes that it's more embarrassing for women to be unmarried than a man. It's also a sense of security. Good. So we'll say, let's go back to Tana Rabbanan. Yasum Shebalisa. So we'll say, listen to this. This is incredible. So let's say Yasam comes to get married. So we'll say, so now he's coming to us to get married. I see he doesn't have the funds to get married. So we want to set him up to be successful in life. So listen to this. Sochon lo bayis, we rent him a house. Umatzian lo mita, we go ahead and we buy him furniture, a bed. V'chol klei tashmisho, and all the utensils for the house. V'achar kach masian lo, and then we marry him off. In other words, we're both saying, we want to set him up for success in life. So how do you set him up for success in life? First, he should have a house. Right? He should have a place to live. He should have some furniture. And then ultimately, again, then he could be successful in life. Shnei Amar. Shabbos say, what's unique about this Gemara is a couple of things. First of all, obviously, societal trends have changed, right? So again, today, right, ultimately young people only find financial security much later on. Hopefully not much later on, but sometime later on. He'll say, but the idea of here from the Gemara's perspective is a man has to be a provider from the beginning. I'll point out, now again, is that everyone? There was always a concept, I just want to point out, there was always a concept of people sitting and learning and being supported. There was always a concept like that. But understand that historically, there was always a miut shebemiut. It was a minority of a minority. In other words, the elite, those who would go on to become something just dramatically amazing for Klal Yisrael, were the ones who sat. But in general, those were the outliers, not the norm. So the norm was you got married and you were able to provide a life of financial security from the beginning. That was the norm. Again, obviously, societal trends change over time. Okay, fine. So the Gemara says as follows. So therefore, we'll say the idea that the Gemara is highlighting is this guy, this Yasum, shows up to Beis Din. He shows up to Beis Din because he wants to get married. So now what we want to do is we want to set him up. We want to set him up to be successful. So what do? So we get him a house, we get him some furniture, and then we marry him off. Shenemar, deimach saro asher yachsalo. So I both say, I want to point out this is a really very interesting pasuk. The pasuk talks about over here, ki pasuach tiftach es yadcha. It's talking about how you treat the poor person. Open up your hand to the poor person, right? Open up your hand, and what? Vavet tavitenu. Literally again, give him and give him. Vavet tavitenu means give him and give him. De machsuro asher yachsalo. That which he is missing, which is deficient for him. So a lot of repetitive lashon over here. So the Gemara is going to analyze the pasuk. Here we go. De machsuro, asher yachsalo. De machsuro, that which he is missing, zehabayis. That refers to a home. Give him a home. Asher yechsar, which he is missing, zeh mita v'shulchan. This refers to a bed and a table, basic furniture. Lo, that which is missing for him, zu isha. This refers to a wife. V'chein hu omer, eselo ezer kenegdo. When I'm speaking about Chava, Hashem says, I will make for him, lo, a helpmate corresponding to. So I just want to point out something amazing. So just look what just happened in that pasuk. What happened in that pasuk is, deimach saro asher yechsar lo. So deimach saro, that refers to a home. Asher yechsar, that refers to furniture. Lo refers to a wife. They're both saying the concept of helping someone get married is a form of tzedakah, which is an incredible thing. So the notion of helping the ani find a wife is in the same pasuk of tzedakah. So you see, I will say, by the way, you see, some people think that getting involved in shidduchim, right? Getting involved in shidduchim, I don't do that. I would say, not getting involved in shidduchim is like saying, I don't give tzedakah. I don't do that. If you would hear someone say tzedakah, it's that, I don't do that. Right? Really? You don't do that? It's like a mitzvah. What do you mean you don't do that? I would say, I want to point out that it's so important for a person to try to be metapel in shidduchim, to try to get involved in shidduchim to some degree. Everyone knows single boys and everyone knows single girls. And at the end of the day, if you could have a hand in helping to bring people together, it's an incredible mitzvah. And in fact, you see the Gemara darshins that it's part of the mitzvah of tzedakah. When this yasam comes along, the same way that we want to give him a house and we want to give him furniture, we also want to help him find a wife. And again, that helping him find a wife is literally included in the mitzvah of tzedakah. It's so beautiful. So we'll say the Gemara goes weiter. So we'll say now we're going to do some incredible tzedakah sugyas. Incredible tzedakah sugyas. Here we go. Tana Abanon. Deimach siro. So remember again, I will say this lashon of deimach siro means literally deimach siro, die means enough. Machsiro, he's deficient, which means when you give tzedakah, give it in a way that allows a deficient person to become whole. In other words, the mitzvah of tzedakah bigadol is to take someone who is chaser, someone who is lacking, and give them enough. So here we go. Atamitzuva alav lefarnaso. Ultimately, again, you are mechuyev to help support a person. V'atamitzuva alav liashro. But you're not obligated to make a person rich. Right? So the Gemara says, Asher yechsar lo. Shabbos, here's what's interesting. So the Gemara says there's like gradations here. Deimach siro means when I look at the ani, I try to figure out what? What's stage one? Stage one, what are you lacking? So what do you need in order to be just a basically whole person? What is it that you need? So that's deimach siro. What are you chaser? So that's my obligation to support. But then the Torah goes on, Asher yechsar lo. Now, what do you think about the phrase Asher yechsar lo? That which is missing for him, which now does something amazing, which is makes the mitzvah of tzedakah subjective. See here, watch this. See, demachsuro, that which he is missing, right? That's objective. What do people need in order to live? So we'll say, what do people need in order to live? Person needs a place to live. Person needs food. Person needs a little bit of money in their pocket. That's objective. Asher yechsar lo means that there is a subjective component to tzedakah. Subjective component. What's the subject? Asher yechsar lo, get ready for this. Afilu. Sus lirkov alov, even a horse to ride on. Ve'eved larutz lefanav, or a servant to run in front of him. And I will say, now, what do you mean a horse? Now, remember again, a horse, I will say, so just to kind of go ahead and explain this over here. So, right, the ani needs a form of transportation, right? So what's the form of transportation you could give him? Right, what can you give him? A donkey, right? In other words, I will say, so to contemporize this a little bit, right? So Lemaisa, what you could do is he needs a form of transportation. What can you give him? Give him whatever. Give him a Toyota. Give him a Kia. Give him whatever it is that he needs. Now the Torah says, Shayech Sarlo, a sus. What's a sus, Rabbi say? What's a sus? A sus, I don't know, like Lahavla Tesla, right? You got it, right? A sus, right? So again, what and Eved Loris Lefanov, an Eved to run in front of him, so we'll say, now, what does this mean? First of all, by the way, this is wild. We'll see Allah Chamaisa what this actually means, because we'll say, after we see what the Gemara is trying to highlight over here. What is the mitzvah of tzedakah? We'll say, let's analyze a little bit. What is the mitzvah of tzedakah? What is it? See, we think it's to give money to people. The mitzvah of tzedakah, that's why the Torah uses the lashon of de yechsar lo. When a person is impoverished, they're struggling, they're chaser. The goal is to try to help them become whole. Tzedakah is not just a monetary halacha, it's a psychological halacha as well. And when a person had a lot, and now they don't have a lot, not only are they missing funds, but often again, there's a psychological component of feeling inadequate as well. So the Gemara is telling us that part of the mitzvah of tzedakah is to allow a person to feel good about themselves. And sometimes when a person was once wealthy and now they're no longer wealthy, the mitzvah of tzedakah demands help that person regain their sense of self. Now, unfortunately, sometimes when people are wealthy, their sense of self is rooted in what? In their money. So that's not healthy by itself. But Lamaisa, I have to try to help rehabilitate that person to try to get them to a good footing where they feel good about themselves. And how do I do that? Give them the sauce and give them the Eved Laras of And I both say, now this is all fine and dandy, but Lamaisa, what do you do when you have competing needs? So we'll get into that. The point that I just want to highlight, I will say, is that there is a psychological component to tzedakah, which I will say so many times, which is so important. Why? We're going to see the mitzvah of tzedakah is not just about what you give, but equally as important about what you give is what? How you give. Because if you give an exorbitant amount of money, but you make a person feel like a piece of garbage, so that's not the mitzvah of tzedakah. Versus you give a little bit of money, and you make a person feel good about themselves, that is the highest form of tzedakah. We're going to see this. So the Gemara says, Amra alav al Hillel azaken, shelakach la'ani ben tovim echad sus lirkav alav, ve'eved larut lefanav. So I'll say, they told about Hillel one time, that Hillel knew a man who was an ani ben tovim. Ani ben tovim means he was a poor person, but he came from a very wealthy family. And Hillel raised the money to go ahead and get him a sus, right? Get him a horse to ride on. The Eved Larutz Lefanav, and a servant runs in front of him. Pamachas lo matza Eved Larutz Lefanav. One time Hillel could not find an Eved to run in front of this guy. The Ratz Lefanav Shlosha Milah. So Hillel himself, right, did the 5K, right in front of this guy. There's much literature on this. First of all, again, the poskim bring down, the Rishonim bring down, there's no mitzvah like this of tzedakah. Furthermore, again, I will say there's a bigger problem. How could Hillel debase himself by running in front of this guy like an Eved? So some explain that last part. The Mun Kacharav has a piece on this where he explains this must have been before Hillel became the Nasi. because if it was after he became the Nasi, he would not be permitted to engage in such behavior. And it's possible that Hillel was just going above and beyond. The point that the Gemara is trying to make is no one actually has the obligation to be an Eved in front of someone to make them feel good. But Lamais, the Gemara is trying to make a point that the mitzvah of tzedakah is not simply a financial obligation. There's a mental health component in it as well. And whatever you need to do to try to help restore a person's sense of self through tzedakah is an incredible mitzvah as well. Let's go weiter. Tan Rabbanon. So listen to this. There was once a Maisa in the people of Galil that they had a certain guy who was from a wealthy family. We'll say Ani Ben Tovim means he comes from a wealthy family. He himself was an Ani. And what happens in Sipori? So we'll say, so what did they do? Shlachul Ani Ben Tovim achas mitzipori. He was from Sipori. Litra basar b'chol yom. And I will say they provided him every day with a litra of basar, 1 litra of meat, because that's what he was used to eating. To which the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, litra shal basar, my rabusa. I will say, by the way, just to give you an idea, what's a litra? A litra is a measure somewhere between 12 and 15 grams. 12 and 15 grams. So they gave him between 12 and 15 grams steak every single day. So the Gemara says, okay, like, it's not crazy. It's not crazy. So why does it make it sound like it was such a big deal? So Amar Rav Huna, litrash basar mishal ofos. So I will say, no. It was a litra of meat, a fowl meat. So I will say, interestingly enough, fowl meat was more expensive than steak, than cow meat. The other possibility is, belitra basar mamish. Ultimately, again, the Gemara says, Aravashi Amar Hasam Kfar Katan Haya B'chal Yom Hava Mafsidi Chiyusa Amitulase. The other Seba say that Rav Ashi said this particular village was not a wealthy village, so there wasn't really a market for meat. So every single day they would slaughter an animal just to provide this guy with his steak, even though they would take a loss on the rest of the animal because no one else in the town was able to afford the purchase of meat. Again, I want to point out, these are not necessarily halacha lamaisa cases, but they are being discussed. We'll see what the halacha lamaisa is, but they're being utilized by the Gemara to highlight this yesod. So you could have said, if tzedakah is just about providing people with what they need in order to live, then what? Give the guy a loaf of bread. Give him a loaf of bread, call it a day. Right? Give him a loaf of bread, right? A little bit of water, a little bit of wine, a little bit of oil, whatever else, and call it a day. The idea that they're going to such measures to provide these aniyim with the delicacies that they were used to highlights, say that when a person has to take, ultimately we'll say, what does it do? It erodes their sense of self, which I will say, by the way, the moment that taking does not erode your sense of self is the moment, unfortunately, that you've fallen into even a darker place. Right? Taking should always erode my sense of self, because the most important thing in life is the ability to be self-sufficient. Now, do we have to take at times in life? Absolutely. Right? Everybody has moments where they have to take. But Lamaisa, having to take should be painful. It should be painful. So our goal as the giver is to make it as least painful as possible. And part of the way I do that is, number one, how I give and what I give. By allowing a person to retain a sense of self as to the state, the level of living we knew beforehand, that's how I help maintain their mental health and their sense of self. Such an incredible use. The Gemara goes weiter. Listen to this, was an incredible Gemara. There was a guy who came before Rabbi Nechemia. Amrlei b'ma'ata soed. So he was a poor man. Rabbi Nechemia said, tell me, what is it that you used to dine on? Amrlei bebasar shamin v'yayin yashan. A Talmudic favorite, right? What did I used to eat, right? Fatty meat and aged wine. Shabbos, listen to this. Now Rabbi Nechemia says to the guy, now essentially you're poor. So how about Ritzoncha shetegalgal imi ba'adashim? How about you join me for lentils? Rabbi Nechemia himself was poor. So he says to the guy, why don't you come and join me for lentils? That's what I have to offer. So Gilgal imo ba'adashim umeis. The poor man ate the lentil meal and he died. He died as a result of the lentils. So Rabbi Nechemia said, Amar, oy lo lazeh shahargu Nechemia. Woe to this one who was killed by Nechemia. To which the Gemara says, 1 second. Adrabah, oy lo Nechemia, le Nechemia shahargu lazeh. shouldn't Nehemiah have lamented the fact that he effectively killed this guy? In other words, Nehemiah should have known better if he's used to a different kind of diet, right? He's eating fatty meat and aged wine, and now you're giving him lentils, which is the poor of the poor. Why doesn't it say, woe to Nehemiah killed this guy? Rabbi said, listen to how profound this Musar is. Ela ihu delo ibayle lefanuke nafshe kulehai. What Nehemiah was saying was, you shouldn't have been such a mifunak. In other words, woe to this guy, you did it to yourself. What do you mean you did it to yourself? As I was saying, by being the kind of person who's so high maintenance, you're so high maintenance that the only thing you could eat is fatty meat and aged wine. By putting yourself on such a pedestal, essentially you did yourself. And I will say, what an incredible and overwhelming musar. How careful we have to be. Luxuries are nice. Luxuries are nice. But what's the challenge in life? The challenge in life is when luxuries very quickly become necessities. And that's where things become dangerous. You want to enjoy luxuries? Absolutely. But never forget that your luxuries are not a necessity. And Nehemiah says, listen, the moment fatty meat and aged wine becomes your necessity for your daily diet, you've put yourself in a serious matzav. Incredible. There was a guy who came before Rava. Amrlo b'mata. So Rava said to him, what do you eat? Amrlo b'tarnagolis petuma. Oh, what do I eat? I only eat fattened hens. That's what I eat. Tarnagolis petuma. V'yayash and old wine. Amrlei. V'lo chayashta leduchka ditzibura. So Rava said, listen to this. So Rava says to the guy, tell me, Ploni, you're being supported by tzedakah. You're being supported by tzedakah. Don't you feel bad using community funds for fattened hens and aged wine? So Rava said, listen to this. Amrlei atu mididea kachilna midrachmana kachilna. So the ani says, you think I'm using your money? I'm using HaKadosh Baruch Hu's money. The Tanina, because we learned, Einei chalilecha yisaberu, v'atano sein lohem es achlam bi'ito. Literally, again, the eyes of all living things turn to you for sustenance. V'ata, and you, Hashem, no sein lohem, give them es achlam, what they need to eat, bi'ito, and His appointed time. Bi'itam lo ne'amar, it doesn't say in their time, rather, ela bi'ito, in His time, which teaches us what? Teaches us that Hashem gives each living thing his parnasa in its time. So we'll say, so now that's the only saying. The only saying, you think you're providing for me? Hashem is providing for me. So adahachi v'hachi ach say derava delachazile tleisar shani v'asile tarnagolis petuma v'yayin yashan. And I'll say, in that moment, as Rava's talking with the ani, who shows up? His sister. Rava's sister shows up. Rava's sister, he hasn't seen his sister for 13 years. She comes with a gift. What's the gift she comes bearing? Tarnagoles, petuma, ayayin yashan, a fattened hen and aged wine. She brings it to Rava, and Rava's able to give it to this ani. Amar mai dekama amar lei na'anisi lecha. Rava said, you know what? What I told you before, forget it. Forget it. Kumechol. Come and eat that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly provided for you. So I will say, like I said, these Gemaras are not necessarily here for the halacha lamaisa import of it. Because again, if someone is being supported by tzedakah, they absolutely have to be mitzamtzim. They do have to minimize their standard of living because they're living off community funds. The point that the Gemara is trying to highlight, Rabbi say, is what? He said, halacha lamaisa, sometimes we think that it's our money that we're giving to tzedakah. That's what we think. That's what we often look at tzedakah distribution. I have money. It's my money. I'm doing something charitable and giving it elsewhere. And what the Gemara is trying to highlight us, Rabbi say, is, first of all, it's not my money. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's money. And the truth is, it's quite possible that the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me this money was so that I have the ability to go out and share it with someone else. So Rabbi say, 2 weeks ago in the Chasidus Chabura, 2 weeks ago in the Chasidus Chabura, we actually did this concept by Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman has an incredible piece, just very quickly, where the Rebbe says that sometimes, it's incredible, sometimes someone else's shefa, someone else's flow, someone else's money comes into my pocket. How that happens, that has a whole arichos on it. But sometimes, and Rabbi say, so when someone comes to me for tzedakah, this is incredible. See, Rabbi say, up until I learned Rabbi Nachman, I was, somebody comes to me for tzedakah, what am I doing? I'm taking my money, giving it to them. The Rebbe says, maybe not. Maybe, in fact, when they're coming to you, what they're doing is they're telling you, not with these words, but ultimately, it's their money that ended up in my pocket. And now it's my obligation to go ahead and make good by them and give them that which is rightfully theirs. So therefore the Gemara is highlighting over here, not that an ani is supposed to eat fattened hen and aged wine, because lamaisa, again, you've got to be careful when you're living off the community, but lamaisa, our hashkafa of tzedakah is that sometimes the money in my pocket, as much as it's in my pocket, and I've worked for it, and I think I've earned it, therefore it's mine, it's not true. Everything belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and sometimes all I am is the custodian and the steward to get it to the right place. Incredible. The Gemara goes weiter. Ein lo ve'ein. So actually, I apologize. We're going to stop over. I apologize. I have a levaya this morning, so you have to just stop a little bit earlier. So we're going to stop over here for today. Don't worry, we are perfectly on schedule. We're going to start a little early tomorrow. Today, tomorrow, incredible sugyas ahead of us. Shkayach, I'm sorry again for the early ending. Shkayach, we'll stop here. All right, have a wonderful day, everyone. Have a great day.